Ever feel trapped in the corporate grind? Today's guest went from corporate burnout to redesigning her dream life. Katrina transformed her 20-month sabbatical into a complete life reinvention. She didn't just survive leaving her job, she thrived, landing 5 job offers in 5 weeks when she decided to return to work. But here's the twist. That taste of freedom led her to eventually break free again, this time for good. Whether you're dreaming of traveling the world or you just need a reset, this episode will show you how to make your career break not just possible, but inevitable. Katrina, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk to you.
I'm so excited to be here, Mindy. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Well, let's go back to the very beginning of your financial journey. Where does your journey with money begin?
I feel like money appeared as a concept for me pretty early on. When I was born, my parents were living in a trailer. I think we technically qualified for public assistance, government assistance. My parents were too proud to take it, but I think I was always aware that money was a means for opportunity because there were things that we couldn't do, like vacations we couldn't take, that maybe I saw some other people taking. But even though I was aware of money, I grew up in rural West Virginia. There was a mix of people. So there weren't like nice neighborhoods and not nice neighborhoods. Everybody just sort of lived together. It really started to sort of build for me this idea that money was freedom. Like when I got my first job at 15 at the nursing home and I was doing housekeeping and laundry working on the midnight shift over the summer, and I was making $5 an hour. And I was like, seeing that paycheck after all that hard work and being like, there has to be a better way. Like, I want to go out into this world and make money. Like, it really cemented that desire. And then I go to college and I go to a great school, a top school. I'm getting a great education, but that was also the first time in my life that I was aware that I was poor, that I felt poor. And I remember, my first sort of like work study job was working in the kitchen, and we had to like take our dirty dishes from our classmates because we had kitchens within our dorm rooms. And I remember just sort of feeling like I'm literally like serving my classmates because I can't afford to pay for my education. And so, for me, it was kind of a complicated relationship, but I feel like the trajectory of all those experiences really set me on a path to like lean into making as much money pretty early on as I possibly could. So I started my first job as an actuary making $45K. I was so grateful for that. But it was like, I was really like dead set on making money however I could. At $45K, I was making more than either one of my parents individually was making. Like, it was a significant amount of money at that time. And I was 21 years old. It was like my mind was just blown at that opportunity,
It is astounding how much you can make coming out of college with a good degree. Even now, there are people who say the same thing. I've heard this a lot. Oh, I'm making more than my parents ever made.
They pushed me to go and they supported me in going, and we took on sort of mutual debt. It was 50-50 with the loans. But I'm so grateful for that because I do think it paved a way for me to kind of start, with a first career that was really solid, like you'd said.
And how long did you work in actuary, miss? I don't even know what that.
Yeah, how long was I in the actuarial world? I focused on actuarial science in the healthcare industry, and I was sort of in that space for 8 years before I decided to leave. Because similar to you, I was a math major, so math by trade, but it wasn't my passion. And I just looked around, and it was a really safe job. It had great job security, great pay. But I just knew like, this isn't where I want to spend the rest of my life. And if I don't leave now, I might never leave. But it was 8 years before I finally decided to take a leap away from actuarial science and go get my MBA.
You went and got an MBA after working for, I'm sorry, how many years did you say? 8 years in actuarial science?
Yeah, 8 years in actuarial science. Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose to get an MBA, and how much did that cost you?
Back to this sort of frame of mind, this baseline that you've always got to be making money, right? Money is the way, corporate, climbing the ladder, keep going, keep going. Well, what does someone do if they have a really great first career, they don't like it, and they want to leave? I didn't know. And similarly, I was like, well, I need to make money, and I can't go be like a fashion designer or an actor or anything because I don't know if I can make money on that. So like, how am I going to figure this out? And I was like, I'll do the smart thing. I'll change my career by going to get an MBA because then I'll be guaranteed to come out making as much or more. So it felt like the way I could sort of like change and pivot in my career without jeopardizing kind of the progress I'd made and the financial gains I had made in my career. And to your question about how much it cost, I mean, I definitely have always been budget conscious. I don't like carrying debt. I've never had credit card debt, but it's a huge expense. I went to a top 20 business school. And so for me, it was like, I'm not going unless I find a way to make this affordable. So I started doing a lot of digging. And I had a friend actually point me in the direction of the consortium. Both the consortium and Forte Fellow. So I ended up becoming sort of a dual fellowship student. I had, I guess, 2 fellowships to go to business school. So I still ended up with about $60,000 worth of debt for cost of living. I chose to study abroad, like paying for everything that was extra, but my actual tuition was covered through those fellowships.
How much were you making after you graduated with your MBA? Did you work throughout the time that you were in your master's, or did you completely cease generating income?
Yeah, I went full time. And so I completely ceased, which is part of why that number for cost of living and stuff was so high. I had no other source of income during that time. So yeah, I went back on the job market, and then I'm graduating from business school in 2010 when the market is equally as crappy.
Woohoo!
I have bad timing with graduation. Yeah, it was rough. And again, people were having like job offers rescinded from like Wall Street. It was just like a really bad time. But I was fortunate enough to have 2 offers. I ended up taking one to go into market research, which is not a very high paid field. At least it wasn't at that time. So my actual like post MBA job paid 90. So I was like one of a few people who didn't really move up at all getting my MBA. But in my mind, I was like, at least I didn't move down. And hopefully I will love this career even more. And then I can stay here forever. And I can sort of like, get back on track with making more money.
Okay, so what point in this timeline did you discover the concept of financial independence?
This was sort of like born of necessity. So this, we're talking like back in like the 2010s. It wasn't something that was as widely talked about as it is now. And social media wasn't really as popular as it is now. So information wasn't as free flowing between people. And it was hard to learn about great resources and things like podcasts and stuff like that. So when I was in my market research job, it was only 8 months in that I realized I am in the wrong place. I have doubled down on a corporate career, and corporate is not what I want. And also I am burnt out, and all I really want to do is travel the world. Oh my God, like what have I done? What have I done, right? And so I looked at my finances and I said, okay, let me figure out what that's going to cost me. Oh, it's going to cost me $38,000 to take a year off and to travel. How much money do I have in my bank account? I have $1,500, and I still have like $50,000 something worth of debt. All these numbers don't add up. Like the math ain't mathin'. How am I going to make the math? Like this feels impossible, but if there was a way, how would I do it? And I sort of went on my own internal adventure to figure out how I could work with money to be able to afford and save for this break that I so desperately needed. So it was really born from a place of like pain. Like I can't be here anymore. I need a break, but I can't afford it. And I'm not taking on debt for it. So I've got to figure out a new way. And I started like really examining my relationship with money.
How long after that 8-month you're working for 8 months, you have this epiphany. How much longer did you work before you decided to just say, I'm leaving?
From like knowing I wanted to do it to doing it was about 20 months. I spent 2 months immediately starting to track every single penny I spent to know like, why do I not have money? Where is it going? What am I doing? And does that even align with my values? And then like after 2 months of very unbiased collection, I started making changes. And so it took me 18 months of saving to save $40K so that I could leave. But I ended up giving my job 8 months notice because I was so on track with my saving at that point that I kind of knew when my leap point was going to be.
8 months notice is that's given me a little bit of nervousness because they could be like, you know what? We don't need 8 months. You're gone today.
Yeah, they could have. It was a real risk.
So you said something that I want to highlight and go back and talk about. You said, I started tracking my spending with no judgment for 2 months because you didn't know why you didn't have any money. That is the number one tip I give to people who are struggling with their finances. Where is your money going? Because you have a finite amount of money and it has to go in a bunch of different places. But it doesn't have to go every single place you're sending it to unless that's where your values align. And if that's where your values align, then you either need to make more money or, figure out an order of importance. But it sounds like you found some holes.
I definitely did. And I think it's so important, like you talked about, like that unbiased, like no judgment, because I find that when you start to judge it, you start to change, but it's temporary. So I was like, I'm just going to do me. So what I realized, as an example, groceries. I love Whole Foods and the local co-op. At the time, it was the Wedge. And I would just shop there and I would do it impulsively, like food and like experimenting with things. I had a gluten allergy. Like spending a lot on food was sort of like an escape from my corporate grind for me. And so when I added it up, it was like $750 a month just on groceries for one person. And that doesn't count the eating out. I wasn't eating out a lot, but like I was still spending like $200 or $300 eating out. So I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like we can revisit this and make some changes. And the thing I like to stress about that is I didn't change where I shopped because I really was aligned to my values. Like we talk about values, like it matters where my food comes from. It matters the quality of my food. Like I'm very passionate about that. But I started shopping with a grocery list and I started buying things that were on sale when they were on sale. Or I started substituting, like if I want a salad, does it matter what kind of lettuce I have? No, if the romaine is on sale, I'm going to buy the romaine. And so I just started being more conscious about like the money I was spending, and just those simple changes. I saved about $300 the next month when I just like approached the grocery store, like one line item in my budget, like differently with a different mindset. I saved a lot.
So tracking your spending is just, I can't stress enough how awesome that is for the FI journey, especially in the beginning where you're trying to figure out how can I make my money last longer? What did you consider your savings rate to be when you were in that 18 months saving up for your $40,000?
Yeah. So I actually got my old trusty hard drive out for this question, because I was like, I have old budgets, old spreadsheets, because I did it by spreadsheet. And I was like, I'm going to find my answers.
Woohoo!
So pre this like dream, right? I was like, how much was I spending? I was only saving about 8%, it was about $400 a month before I decided to make this change, right? Like when I'm observing what I'm doing and I'm like, what am I really doing? Then I made a change. And so by the time, like it was 18 months of saving. So the average over that time, which it obviously got much better as I went along and I got better about making decisions, but it was about 22%. So I was saving $1,100 a month and I was still paying like $600 a month in student loans and other obligations that I had. And I was still managing to save $1,100 a month. So that is where about half of my $40,000 came from, was increasing my savings rate.
Where did the other half come from?
The other half came from lump sums. So this was a really big one for me that I didn't know was going to be as big as it was. But every single time I got a surprise lump sum, if it was a birthday present, an escrow refund, a tax refund, or the biggest one, a bonus, right? My annual bonus. If it was a lump sum of money, I immediately put it into the savings account and I would allow myself maybe like $100 to celebrate. And that actually ended up being the other $20,000 between those things over 18 months. And so I see sometimes people want to like take it and they're like, oh, I should treat myself. I've been doing such a great job saving. I'll put like half of it away or I'll spend some of it. And I was like, nope, put it away. And it really just accelerated my progress.
Where were you putting this money? Was it just a bank savings account?
Yes, I just had a big save. I think I was with the credit union. Maybe I had like a savings account. And then I also had my original Bank of America savings account. So I had two. And I would put them sort of in there and just kind of like split it equally. But yeah, it was just a savings account. So it was mixed with my regular money, like kind of like money I was paying bills and all that stuff. But because, my actuarial brain loves spreadsheets and things, I was tracking. So I was very aware of like how much was really for my break and how much was for like bills and things like that.
Yeah, I like the way that you qualified that your actuarial brain allowed you to separate the two monies, even the two funds, even though they were all in one account. I have to figure out a method that works for me. So I love that you were able to figure that out. But for anybody watching this, if that's too few for you, grab a couple of extra bank accounts. They're not that expensive. I think they're free. So, it's give and take. But if you want, like you probably, what is this, like 2010, 2012?
That's 2012, around 2012. Mm-hmm.
The market's starting to go up and it can be really tempting to put your money into the market because I'll grow it more. But for anybody watching this, if you need that money within 2 to 5 years, you need to 1 to 5 years, now to 5 years, you need to put that in the high yield savings account, and just your job is to protect the value of that, not to grow it as big as you can.
Absolutely. And I got burned really early on. So I learned that lesson the very hard way. I did not have wise Mindy telling me things like that. But yeah, I lost half of my 401k. I started 401k at 21 years old and I was so ahead of the curve. And then at like 25, 50% of it was like gone in just a couple of months. And so I knew, since I needed that money with a very finite date, to not invest it in the market.
Did you cash out your 401k or did you leave it in there?
I left it in there.
Okay, good. So you didn't lose it. You just lost it on paper.
Yeah, I lost the concept of the 50,000 I could have had. But yeah.
Yes, but still, like, seeing that number go down and continuing to go down is very heartbreaking.
Yeah, especially at 23. And you're like, I was doing the right things. Yeah.
Exactly. So, well, let's talk about investments. Are you continuing? You don't have a 401k because you are...
Right. Self-employed. Yep.
So you could have a 401k. Do you know a self-directed solo 401k?
Like I said before, Mindy, I have been burned several times. So I have to admit, I'm probably one of the most like investment shy people that you'll ever talk to, because I did a lot of those things. But I would say right now, I have the 401k existing. And so I've let that sit. I've actually had someone in the FIRE community suggest I do other things. But when I was 26, I dated someone who sold life insurance, and he convinced me that I needed like a universal life insurance policy. And so I know. So I have about $15,000 sitting there. Now it is like getting a 4.5% or 5% interest, but I'm obviously paying the insurance fee every year to have the insurance policy. And so I've discovered that maybe it might be cheaper to get like a term policy and to pull that money out and just invest it or put it in a, like a savings account, like a high yield something somewhere else. But I do have that. And so basically, with my business at this point, I basically break even. I don't have a lot of discretionary income. And so I've kind of set a target in my mind of where I want my business to go. And when it gets there, I feel like I'll have the sort of like extra money to start reinvesting. I did own a home at one point, but that similarly, like, the timing of it, all the things in a textbook, they say like, do this for sure because you'll definitely win at life. I like did them and I was like, go me, I bought a house at 24. And then it ended up like being a terrible thing, a terrible decision. But yes, so those are the main ones. It's my 401k. I have a savings account that I have like an interest on that I use. My business account I have on the side as well. I have a little bit in stocks, about 4,000, but I don't do anything with that at this point. And and then that life insurance policy that's collecting about 5%.
Yeah, your ex-boyfriend, I'm mad at him.
Me too.
So do you have a FI timeline or a FI number?
I don't have a FI timeline or number at this point. And the reason is because I find that when I try to set goals like that, I get very stressed and very like high pressure about my business. Like my very type A self is like, I need it to be bigger. I need to hit this goal. If it's not doing it, it's failing. And so I have in my mind when my business gets to a consistent 6K, where it's like generally month to month, it feels like 6K. It's not like one is like a 10K and then one is like 0, but just feeling like there is sort of like some smoothing out and like that is my average. I've then decided I feel ready to go back into investing and then to like revisit how can I ramp this up to do my version of FI. But I think the other sort of trade-off that I've made is that I really love what I do and it's mine to own. And like I wrote a book with a publisher and done these other things that feel really meaningful and create like other opportunities. So it's also like building a life that I feel like I don't have to immediately retire from. So I feel like I have like extended my ramp, barring any like short-term disability or long-term disability. Like I've sort of extended my ramp to give myself time to answer that. But yeah, I have like a figure in my head of when I'm going to start investing. And from that point, then I feel like I can start putting more parameters back in for my new timeline and number.
Okay, you just said something that I love. You said my version of FI, and everybody should have their own version of FI, but we hear about lean FI, fat FI, barista FI. My version of FI seems like it has so much more flexibility. I think setting yourself up for the best version of FI that fits what you want to do is really what you need to be focusing on more than a specific number, especially if that number gives you the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to enjoy both the journey and also create an amazing destination. And so it's finding, that balance. And like my version of FI is having options, and being able, like you said, to travel when I want to. And like I got heavy into points and miles when I took my first career break, and it's allowed me all kinds of crazy things, like staying at, like $1,200 a night hotels for free. And my sister works for Delta and made me her companion for 5 years. So free flights domestically, and then like just taxes internationally. So like the universe has conspired to help me in this goal, but it's really about like working all the angles to like figure out, how do I enjoy the journey, do meaningful work with the time I have on this earth that lights me up and helps other people, but then also like building towards an even better future. So
yeah, I love that. Well, we haven't talked about your sabbatical yet. Tell me about that and how did you like that? Because you did ultimately go back to work after the sabbatical.
Yeah, I mean, it was life-changing. It was amazing. But context around that. So I'd planned it. I gave 8 months notice. I've been planning this thing for like 18 months. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And then less than a week before my break started, my younger brother very unexpectedly passed away. And so I did not know this was going to happen. It was the worst, still to date, right? Like the worst moment of my whole life. And I'm standing at the precipice of the worst moment mixed with like one of the best. And what my break gave me that was life-saving is the space to process all that grief and to find joy and meaning in life again, and to do things that were going to allow a better version of Katrina to appear at the end of her break that was even better than when her break began. I don't know that I could have survived that going back to a job I hated. Like it was just, it was so much. It was too much. And so I did things. I cried a lot, but I traveled a lot. I did a 3-month road trip through the US. I visited friends. I went to new places. I drove up the coast of the whole like A1 all the way up the West Coast. And just like saw amazing things, ate amazing food. I went to travel to Western Europe. I lived in Argentina for a month. I went to Vietnam for almost a month. It was incredible. I lived in Southeast Asia for 4 months. I got certified as a yoga instructor in Bali. Like I just lived all of my dreams. I came to Denver and started taking classes for fun and to learn. I learned how to ferment my own vegetables at an adult community ed class. Like I just really had a holistically amazing experience that was everything I needed. And when I came back from that, right, I still had my business school debt. And I said, what is my new goal? My new goal, now that I've taken this break, is to become debt-free so anything is possible. Like debt-free was like my next level of FI. And it was like, then I only need to make money to cover what I'm spending like day to day. And so I did that. I went back on the market, like you said in the intro, 5 job offers in 5 weeks. I took a job. I think the starting salary was about 92. About 92. And I started working. I moved to Boulder. I worked there for a year. And I was so excited because my savings rate, like I was looking this up because I was like, I think it got like pretty high once I came back after all these skills from my break. And yeah, it was at 60%. I did have a boyfriend at that time, so it made it a lot easier to split expenses. And we did like purposely live below our means, but I was saving 60% of my paychecks at that time and putting it all towards my student loan debt, paying off the highest interest first. And yeah, in 21 months, I was debt free.
You finish your sabbatical, you come back, you get a job, 21 months, you are now debt free again. When did you start thinking about leaving that job?
So I got certified as a life coach in like 2016 going into 2017. And I knew at that point when I signed up for that, I thought to myself, the corporate grind is not for me. Someday I would like to leave. But I thought I had a lot more time before I was ready to leave. So I get certified. I start coaching people on the side of my very demanding corporate job. And then I was kind of like, I hit this pain point where I was like, I have to ask them to go part-time. And it was a really small company. But I was just like, I got to be brave. I got to do the brave thing. And so I asked, I made a case. I like gave an alternative for how we could make it work. I was like, I'll take the pay cut, of course. And so they said yes. And so one day a week, I was working in my business and then nights and weekends. And I thought I could do that for a long time. But something happened. And that something was I booked a trip to Italy because it was a crazy deal. It was like $480 round trip from Minneapolis to like Bologna, which is where I wanted to go. And I was like, oh my God, I'm taking this deal. And I told my bosses, I just booked a trip to Italy in 6 months. And they're like, fine. But I didn't put it on the calendar, Mindy. I forgot to put it on the calendar. And so May is coming up. And I decided to do this coaching program that took me out of the office for like 4 or 5 days at the very beginning of May. And then I have my trip to Italy at the very end. When I put these both on the calendar at the same time, like it was a big deal. Like I had to get a talking to from my 2 bosses who were the 2 owners. Like they came together to like tell me about it. And then it came up again in my like annual review. And I remember just thinking like, I am no longer employable. Like I am not working and earning. I mean, it was time I had earned. I'm like not working and earning to like have to ask permission to do the one thing that I want to do, which is travel. And I just remember thinking like, I have to find a way to make this business work or some version of it because I need to be free.
So Katrina, how did you finally come to terms with leaving the job? Like just because you're not employable doesn't mean you still have this comfort level with this income so that you can do this stuff on the side. And if this stuff on the side fails, you still have this safety net of your regular job.
Yeah. So I basically looked at my money. I looked at my resources, right? Like I was like, Mom, if I'm broke and destitute, can I come crash with you for 2 months while I have to find another job, right? Like I just really looked at, do I have enough savings to get through the next couple months and figure it out? And that was like the pain of like staying. I just felt like it was time for my business and time for me to grow. I ended up giving them 4 months notice. So I still like was working and saving really hard in those 4 months while I was working to like make it as smooth of an exit as I could. But I just remember feeling like it was like a leap of faith. But honestly, Mindy, for me, it came back to like remembering what happened on my break. Like I said, it was life-changing. Like it shifted my reality. And I was like, I found 5 job offers in 5 weeks. Like I know what I'm capable of. Like this is me. It's not like a fluke. This is me. Like I know how to show up for myself. I have great work experience. I can always find another job. I might like it less. It might pay less, but worst case, I will find a job. So I just decided to go for it. And I trusted myself to figure it out if the job thing didn't work. Now, ultimately, what ended up happening is I gave my notice. I'm planning to quit. And then 2 months before I actually left, the market shifted a little bit with my house in Atlanta. And it was just such a nightmare for me to be a landlord. I'd been a landlord for 10 years remotely and having to pay a management company. It was so expensive. And I just decided to sell it. And so it ended up that the equity, like I didn't really profit from that sale of the house, like back to like things not working out the way that people tell you they're going to. But I did over the 14 years, I had built up enough equity that I put that into a savings account. And I had that to help me feel safe to make this transition and to know like I could go like 2 or 3 or 4 years on that and like living frugally and make it work. So I was like, okay, I can totally make this happen.
Okay, so you've got these funds to live on, and it might not have been necessarily the most amount that you could have, but you sold the house, you had funds to live on. How many months of runway did you have by selling that house?
Yeah, so I sold my house and I profited probably $85,000 from just the equity over time. And at that time, I could live off of like, $2,000 a month if I had to. So I had a very like years long ramp where I could have used that money, barring any like, car repairs or anything big coming up in my life, like a health thing. I had a fair amount of time that I could have used that money if I needed to just keep going if my business had produced zero.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that there's this giant amount of runway, so you can take a little bit of risks without being like, okay, well, I only have 30 days and then I have to go back and get another job. I think if you only have 30 days, you don't have enough runway to leave your job. You should start looking for a new job if you're in one of those, oh, I hate my job. Start looking for a new job so you can have this runway, or stay at the job until you have more runway. Or take a page out of Katrina's book and just sell your house.
There you go.
Okay, so Katrina, we have talked about a lot of, great aspects of your FI journey. What was the biggest mistake you made on your financial journey, and what advice would you give to others so they avoid that same mistake?
I would say it's my house. So there's like an A and a B, but I would say A, buying the house. So at 24, I bought a $200,000 townhouse because I had a great job. I was doing so well. The interest rates were low. I think my interest rate was like, 3.5% or 4%. And it felt like I had really made it. Like to be able to do that, like it was in West Buckhead, like a very nice part. I could not even probably afford to live there now with the way housing has gone. But like I felt like I had achieved a milestone, but it wasn't right for me. And I think what happened in my journey with owning a home is there were a lot of unforeseen expenses. Assessment, HOA, it keeps inflating. By the time I left, it was like $500 a month for the HOA. Having to hire a property manager was very expensive when I moved out and I was renting it. And so I wish I had just saved that hard and instead put that money into other types of investments or other strategies that just fit where I was at, right? That weren't about like checking a box. I wish I had known about FIRE then. Oh my God, I wish, back in like 2003 or 4 when I bought my home, I knew about these things because I could have done so much with that money. And I thought I was doing the smart thing, but it ended up not feeling good because it wasn't really about me. And it also ended up financially not becoming the asset that I had hoped that it would be and that people told me it would be. So I think like just thinking about like what's in alignment with you and then finding ways to make your money work within that context is what I would recommend. Like don't just do it because it seems like everybody else is doing it. Like find something that feels good to you. And then I would also say, honestly, when I sold my house, I wish I had invested some of that money instead of just letting it sit in an account that was saving. But truly at that point, I still wasn't really sure what to do with it. So I wish I had like taken the time to maybe educate myself as a part-time job for a month or two about all the options so that my money was working for me instead of just sitting kind of parked in a savings account.
Okay, so we're going to first address this part about you wish you invested that money. That money was for you to live off of for, the next 1 to 4 or 5 years. So your job is to protect the value currently, not grow it as much as it can. So you can't regret that because that wasn't a bad decision. I remove that regret from you. All right, Katrina, this was super fun. Thank you so much for your time today. I really had a great time talking to you. Where can our audience find more about you?
Yeah, they can find out more about me on my website. So it's just kmcgheecoaching.com. The H is silent, so it's KMCGHEE coaching.com. And you can find out a lot more about me. You can find out about my story, what I do, just pictures from my break. It's all there.
I love that. And we will include a link down below. Please click it and check out Katrina's career break and sabbatical coaching. I think that there's a lot of ways to do a sabbatical and you can do it wrong and really mess up your whole time off. Katrina, thanks again for your time. I really had a great conversation with you.
Thanks so much, Mindy.
If you like this video, please click the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more inspiring FIRE videos just like Katrina's. This is Mindy Jensen signing off.